Hey everybody, welcome back to Season 2, Episode 8 of the Maddox podcast. We have Season 2, Episode 7's guest back on here for another round. Our little wealth of knowledge over here, Robert Ring. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Jamie.
How's it going?
It's going great. Happy to be here.
Yes, we're happy to have you. You brought some wine with you today. Do you want to introduce it?
I do.
I want you to read what it says in the back.
I'm going to read it in my best voiceover voice. Okay, so this is the Sisla wine, product of Spain, Edition Noir. It's a blend of Tempranillo, Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Garnacha. Garnacha is really good. You would see it as Grenache here.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Pinot, but a little less commercialized. So this is the translated description into English because the Spanish one is up top. So there's some, you'll see. Here we go.
Here we go.
Wine of a dark red cherry color with tile color trimmings. Garnet bluish tones in a high layer. In the nose, varietal notes are well complemented, with the contribution of its aging during 12 months in the barrel, providing the wine with softly toasted notes of what, you might ask, and certain evocation of spices. Again, which spices? And a light note of clove. It's the one tasting description we get in the whole description.
Clove.
I love it.
Clove.
Get some clove on this wine. Congratulations. And this is my favorite line. In the mouth, it is well-bodied with a greedy entry and elegant balance.
We love something well
So,
bodied
I
in
love
the mouth.
that.
Let's
Do you know
try
anything
it.
more about this wine after I just read that description?
Well, did you say cherry in there?
Well, no, the color looks like cherry. but
Color,
Doesn't
okay.
every
All right.
wine that's red look like cherry mostly? I don't know.
Yes, well bodied in the mouth.
Oh, greedy. Greedy. That's good. That's good.
Does anybody smell clove on there?
I don't think I smell clove.
James Suckling gave this a 91.
All right.
Somebody tag him in the comments.
So James Suckling knows
So what does something like this
something about
cost?
it.
I'm not embarrassed to say because I got a really good deal on it.
Okay.
I think I spent $9 on this wine.
Well, it's great for $9.
Wines.com?
I got it from a friend of mine who's a Spanish wine importer, and he had to get rid of a bunch of his wine because he gets a wine by the truckload like once a year, and he's got to make room for some new wines. So I think he didn't have enough boxes to do like a wholesale sale of like one shipment of like whatever this is, so I got like 32 bottles of wine for $295 from him.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Wow.
So this
Yeah, it
isn't,
was amazing.
That is
this
insane.
isn't something you can get in the store then.
You could find this online. I think when I tried to look for his wines online, they were all in Europe. You couldn't buy them here. So he has really good wines. His Garnachas are amazing. This is part Garnacha, but I got one from him. I bought out all like 6 bottles that he had of his Garnacha, 100% Garnacha. And I think he charged me $7 or $9 a bottle, and it's phenomenal. It's like one of my favorite wines. It's so good. It tastes like a Pinot before Pinot was commercialized. Like, remember when we used to like Meiomi? Me oh my.
What?
No? You don't know? Remember when Meiomi came out? Okay,
No.
remember when Menage a Trois came out?
Yes.
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 Okay, so when Meiomi came out, it was also like the Menage a Trois. It was like the big buzz. Everybody's like, oh my God, this is the Pinot to go get. And it was good,
Yeah.
right, in the beginning. But then it became super popular, and now it tastes like not so good. I don't want to call it garbage because it's not terrible, but it's not very good,
Yeah.
right?
They changed. Menage a Trois changed too.
Did it change? I haven't had it in a while.
Oh, yeah, Menage a Trois is garbage now. It used to be
changed
tasty.
It used to be pretty good. It changed over the years for sure, I think.
Well, they came out with a midnight version or something.
yeah, I like the silk.
Yeah.
It was called
Has
Menage
chocolate
a Trois
in it?
Midnight. Yeah.
Midnight silk. I like silk. It's a little softer.
I like the
More-
white label. Was that the original?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a few. There's the cab, then there's the blend. The blend is
I
good.
think the blend is what I like.
You can track this with a lot of popular wines, though. Like when they first come out, they'll be pretty good, and the more popular they get, the worse they'll get. Because I think when you're trying to scale, especially with a delicate grape like a Pinot Noir, it's just hard to do with quality. I mean, the reason that the Pinots are so expensive on their own is because it's a delicate grape, and you lose,
Right.
part of the stock. So if you're trying to make, a million cases, they're probably adding things to it that you wouldn't taste in a normal, Pinot.
Yeah.
So with Garnacha, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds because it's not
I
as
need
popular
to
as Pinot.
expand past the regular like cabs, Pinots, and go into because I know there's a lot of variety out there. I buy wine like buyers buy houses. If it looks pretty, I want it.
I know. I like the marketing for sure.
The pretty labels.
Yeah.
I judge the book directly by its cover.
Yeah, and descriptions like that really win me over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Greedy in the mouth.
Greedy in the mouth.
Got it. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway.
Sorry. Okay. So
Oh.
okay.
On that note, actually today we're going to hard pivot right here to we're talking about the BRRRR method. What is the BRRRR method, you ask? It stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat.
That was good. Now say it.
That was really
fast.
good.
Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat.
That's good. It's good. I always forget how many R's there are and what they stand for.
Oh, that's the only thing I memorized for today. The rest is just up to you, Rob. So take it away. What is the BRRRR method?
Well, just like you said, it's the idea that you buy an investment property that's run down. Don't buy a nice one.
Mm-hmm.
You rehab it, so you remodel it. And then you rent it out for more than you could rent it out when you bought it. And now it's worth more money. So you do a cash out refinance and you get your money back that you put into it, your down payment and your rehab costs, your remodel costs. And then you take that money and you go do it again. And it sounds great. And it is great if you're good at math or you follow the right formulas. You just have to know your numbers is really what it comes down to with this.
Yeah.
This is a popular method with apartments because with multifamily housing, which let's just clearly define what that is. So if you have a home and it has between 1 and 4 units, they can be attached, they can be detached, it doesn't matter. It's one property with 4 houses, they could be all apartments next to each other, whatever. That's considered residential, right? You can buy that with a really easy loan, low down payment, easy access, right? If it's 5 or more units, this is the primary characteristics, so there's other, but we're gonna focus on this. If it's 5 or more units, that's a commercial property, and that's what we call commercial multifamily. It's not protected by housing or urban development the same way that it is for 1 to 4 units. It's not covered by RESPA the same way, which is the Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act, which protects consumers when they're going to buy properties. Vastly different disclosure requirements. So anyways, the BRRRR method is really popular, and this is where it's primarily used, and this is where it was really born, with multifamily. So you're going to go buy, a 20 unit, it really works well on scale. So let's say you go buy a 40 unit apartment complex, and I'm just going to pull my calculator out and do some quick math for you. And let's say, the person who owned this apartment complex ran out of money to put into it. They ran out their tax depreciation, which means it was no longer really a tax advantage for them to own it. Hadn't remodeled units in a long time. They were kind of lazy about raising rents. And so the rents are way under market. It needs to be remodeled, and that's there's a big value opportunity there is what it all leads to, right? Those are the things you want to look at. So let's say we got 40 units, and just to make it easy, they're all 2 bedrooms, and the 2-bedroom market should be $2,250, right? That's a good 2-bedroom market. That's what, around here.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's say this guy's are around like 1,600, right? Let's say they're an average of 1,600. So you got 40 units at 1,600. So he's generating. Let's see if I did times 100 and. Gosh, I can't talk. 40 times 1,600, $64,000 a month. Okay, so let's dollar that out. $768,000 a year gross. Okay.
And what is this 40-unit building going to cost you, though? I mean, that's like.
So there's going to be a calculation for it, and one of the so it's going to be based on the market cap for the area. So we'll get into that a little more, but when people talk about a capitalization rate. If you go invest in multifamily in the Bay Area, let's say the East Bay and Oakland and San Francisco, you're going to find what we call low cap rates. And that's just like how often does your money, like what kind of return does your money give you, right? So if I go spend $1 million and it generates for me $30,000 a year, that's a 3% cap rate, right? And so 3 to 4% cap rates are pretty common in the Bay Area, and that's what investors are looking for. And one of the reasons that they're low is because it's a low risk situation. So a lot of investors want to be in the Bay Area. There's a lack of housing. They'll always be able to rent out these units. And generally, if they're savvy and they stay on top of their investment, they won't get caught up in bad cycles of under market rents and rent controlled situations and, deferred maintenance where the house is falling apart or whatnot, right? So there is a back end calculation you can just say, here's the area and here's the amount of money it produces. What should the purchase price be? That's one way to get to it. That's how a lot of people get to it when they're looking at their home. But let's say that you want to go invest in a more risky area where there's not a big housing shortage. And there's some places like this in Texas. I'm sure there's some places there's a lot of places like this out in Illinois. Some parts of the Midwest where there were big manufacturing places. Michigan comes to mind. And then those jobs left. Defense contractors, Boeing, those people left, right? Whatever it is. And now it's a little more risky. Well, you could maybe get like a 15% cap rate, which is amazing. So if I spend $1 million, I'm going to get $150,000 a year. 100%. Yeah. There's other risks involved, though, right? You could have higher vacancies.
And just so the audience knows, a higher cap rate is ideal. Like you want a higher cap rate.
Yes, absolutely. But it took me a while to connect the dots here when I was thinking about this. But if you think every time you're going to see a higher cap rate, it's going to be associated with more risk.
Okay.
Right? That's typically the case. Now, you can find corners of the market and niches inside the market where that risk will be seriously mitigated and you can still get a high cap rate. And I think that's a great way, like the way that we invest, we go about it creatively. There's a whole lot of ways to get around that. But just in general, let's say I'm a passive investor, and let's just define that real quick. We're defining a lot of terms here. So an active investor is somebody who goes out, buys the property, oversees the rehab, hires the contractor, hires the property manager. I mean, they're on site doing everything, right?
Active.
That's an active investor. A passive investor might say, I'm going to put $1 million into Jason's fund, and he's going to go buy an apartment complex for me and for everybody else here with the $10 million he's accumulated in the fund, and all I'm going to get is a check every year, right?
Okay.
So,
yeah.
You'll pick out key markets and you can get good returns on that. You're not usually going to get crazy returns unless, again, you're taking on a really high amount of risk. But some people have a lot of money and they don't want it to sit in the bank, right? They want the write-offs. They want to invest in real estate, and so they'll put it into a fund that goes out and buys these things. That's a completely passive investor versus a completely active investor, and then there's all the ranges in the middle, right? So when we're talking about this, so let's go back to the scenario. Okay, so let's say you buy this property. So it generates $768,000 per year, and let's just say that is, let's see. Let's say that's a $19 million property in its current format. We're going to use like a 4% cap rate,
so
right?
40 unit building for $19 million.
40 units for $19 million, right?
Okay.
Generates $768,000 a year. Okay, so now let's say that you buy it and you rehab it, and let's say that you spend, I don't know, $10,000 on each unit. Maybe that's a lot, but that's probably reasonable, right? $10,000.
That's very reasonable.
Right?
Yeah.
Depends on what you're going to do for sure, right?
Right.
Times 40 units. So you put $400,000 into it. That might be like lipstick on a pig. You could obviously go a lot higher than that, right? And then you turn around and you say, okay, now I can get $2,000 per unit because these units are they have a lot more curb appeal. Sure, they're old, but they've got way more curb appeal. They're cute now. Okay, so now let's take $2,000 times 40 units. Now we're $80,000 a month times 12. Now we're generating $960,000 per year, right? So we've done almost a $200,000 increase in our revenue. That's really on a basic level how this works. Now let's take the $960,000 and we will go, okay, based on the new calculation, if we're going to get a 4% cap rate, now the value of our building is $24 million, right?
So 19 to 24 with the improvements.
With the improvements.
Okay.
But it's not just with the improvements. We got the people out, we improved it, and then we re-rented it at the higher price. Because on a multifamily home, there's multiple methods to valuation. And you guys know this because when you took the real estate test, talk about the methods of valuation. When you see appraisals, we're usually working with the comparable sales method, right? But there's also the what's the name of it?
So there's the cost approach.
Yeah, cost approach.
There's the income approach.
Income approach.
So with commercial real estate, they're mostly going to rely on the income approach. So what's the value of this property based on the income that it generates?
So that's how they do commercial appraisals.
Absolutely, yeah. And a commercial lender will say, okay, based on the income that this property generates and the net profit based on the profit and loss, we will lend X amount of dollars. Right, and so then you have to come up with the difference. So in the Bay Area, you typically have to come up with a lot down because you're not getting as high of a return for the money that you're spending. Whereas if you go to another place with a 10 or 15 or 20% return, you may not have to put as much down because it's what's going to call debt service. So there's something, and we're getting into the weeds here, but we'll just go step by step. There's something called DSCR. And this is kind of a buzzword in the BRRRR community right now.
BRRRR.
Yeah.
Got a lot of acronyms.
And DSCR stands for Debt Service Coverage Ratio. Okay. So that means that if the total of my mortgage payments, including property taxes and insurance, let's say they total $1 million every year, and the total of my rents are $1.5 million every year, then my debt service coverage ratio is 1.5. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's really simple. So when you're looking at a debt service coverage ratio for like commercial investments, a lot of times they're going to want to see that you're covering it by about 30 to 40% more.
Okay.
They're kind of conservative around here. It definitely will vary on the product. It will vary depending on whether there's aggressive features on the product. And what I mean by this is when you're getting into commercial loan territory, you can have prepayment penalties, which are super common actually. Most commercial loans will have prepayment penalties. You can have balloon payments. You can have short-term ARMs. You can have adjustability features. So there's things in there where it's like, sure, the more you give away, maybe the more you can get, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to really balance that. But that's the basic of the BRRRR method. So then we'd refinance based on the new valuation, and we'd get our money back plus some, maybe hopefully what we put down, and what we rehabbed it for, and then we'll go do another 40-unit apartment building. Okay. Now, again, that's a little hard to do around here with apartment buildings, but let's just say you're looking at the whole United States. There's a lot of people right now that say, man, I could invest out in, Alabama because houses are $30,000. You absolutely could. And there's places throughout the country where you can not have a lot of money and get really good returns. Like I just helped a friend sell her house in Arkansas, in El Dorado, Arkansas, right? So we sold it for $22,000. Somebody's going to come in there and remodel it.
Crazy.
They're probably going to be all in for $50,000 or $60,000. It'll rent for $750 per month.
$750.
Yeah, $750 a month.
That's crazy.
Which is not a lot of money, right? But that's more than a 10% return per month.
So there it is.
So you're getting more than 10%. Is not per month. You're getting more. You're getting more than 1% per month of your total investment cost.
Well, I mean, it's great because you're under 100,000 on the whole entire investment.
Yeah. The problem is you've got to, if you really want to make serious money on these small time investments, you have to do a lot of them. And if they're out of state, you have to have them managed, and the management fee, is going to cut into your profit. So you really need to be able to do this 10 to 20 times. And people that are getting into the BRRRR method now that think they can just go rinse and repeat, it's not that straightforward. And so let's get into what are the pitfalls of the BRRRR method.
Well, real quick, before we get into that, I just wanted to dive into, on a smaller scale in the Bay Area, and not a 40-unit building, but maybe a duplex or a triplex or something like that, and how important it is for people when they're, sometimes, and I see this all the time, they'll get a tenant in there, and the tenant they love their tenant, so they never raise the rent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the rents are so low. And then the property doesn't appraise because they're using the income approach, right? So they can't sell the property with tenants because, and then if you're in a situation where you've got rent control, then you can't evict them. So how do you what do you do in this?
So they
situation?
won't use the income approach, but the income will affect the value, right? So just because for 1 to 4 unit, Fannie Mae is always going to want us to use the sales comparison approach,
right?
But they'll talk about the income approach on there. They'll do what's called a 1007, which is a comparable rent survey, and they'll say, hey, this is way under market, and then it will affect marketability and how much somebody will pay for it. So indirectly, the income approach is having the heaviest weight on the marketability of it.
Okay.
And that's why you see you'll see a fourplex in Berkeley sell for $1 million because you've got some guy in there who's 70 years old and he's paying $500 a month.
Yeah.
More than that, no? Oh, if you mean it's low.
Because they're rent controlled.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's rent controlled and the value is lower because of the income.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
and in a situation like that, and they'll only I think you're right. I think typically an appraiser would go, I'd like to use the income approach. This is where it'd be great to have Anthony Young on here talking about this. But
let's get him on.
An underwriter would say, for Fannie Mae or for Freddie Mac or for FHA, we need you to give us the sales comparison approach. What are other fourplexes selling for, and then what are market factors affecting the value? And they would write a big paragraph about why Bob paying $500 a month is really affecting the value.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's tougher to do. So what do you want me to talk about? I don't want to do.
Well, I just wanted to bring it on in a lower, a lower scale price point, because people that are watching this are probably not going to buy a 40-unit building. They're probably thinking on a lower scale, duplex, triplex, fourplex, things like that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of dive
So let's
into
talk
it
about that. So one of the top questions I get because accessibility is easy for a duplex, right? You can do 3.5% down. It's easy for a fourplex. You can now do 5% down, right? But if somebody comes to you, Jamie, and says, well, where am I going to find a triplex? What do you say?
That's a good question. Let me run a search. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
But there's certain markets throughout the Bay Area that have them, and there's certain ones that don't.
Oh, for sure.
And the markets
you're not going to find it in.
Yeah, and the markets that have them are rent controlled.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Oakland has a lot of them, and Oakland and Berkeley has a lot of them, and they're super rent controlled.
And Richmond and now Concord is following the whole,
Oh, don't get me started. That's terrible.
Yeah, I know. So I had a client who called me, and she's like, I want to sell my Concord duplex because they're pulling the whole Richmond thing, and it's she's not.
It's hard, and those
happy.
laws very much side with renters, and it really takes the power away from owners, which is hard. It's kind of
It's bad. I fought that in person at the council meetings, and they just don't care. They want to do what they want to do.
And it's a big debate because, you know, when you become an owner, then you start to get it. But when you're not an owner and you're a renter, you want all the rights. But to take these rights away from people that own these properties it's a challenging topic.
Right.
And single family homes are exempt. So they're not exempt from the how much you can raise the rent by, but they are exempt from just cause eviction. So like when the term is up, you can get somebody out. Whereas with a multifamily or a duplex plus, et cetera, when the term is up, it converts to month. You cannot get them out. Yeah. You have to give them the month to month.
Okay.
In California, when a residential lease ends, it automatically converts to month, right? So, the problem with that, and I talked about this, you know, you've got all these housing advocates that come in, and they drag people in, many people that don't speak English, by the way, and they give them a paper and say, go up and read this, and they'll talk about their personal problem with a translator that they've had in their housing situation. They'll say, for this reason, I want you to pass rent control and just cause eviction, and they'll parrot whatever the housing nonprofit is telling them to say. And a lot of times it's not even relevant to their situation. Like the law that they're supporting would not affect them positively or negatively in any way. Like there was a guy that got up and he kept talking about how there was health and safety issues in his apartment and a gas leak and all these problems, right? Electrical problems, and he couldn't get. So please pass rent control and just cause eviction. I'm like, that's not going to do anything for you. Mm-hmm. Like there's existing laws on the books in Concord for anti-harassment and in California that would protect you. You just need an advocate, and the advocate that you have is doing a crappy job because they're dragging you in here to support their cause while not helping your cause that you're talking about. You know what I mean? And so I actually got some of these people's names, and I started connecting with people that could help them because I was like, because you know, in Concord you can call the city building department, and they'll send out a city inspector, and then they'll serve your landlord with a notice saying you've got to fix these things. I mean, so there's ways to do it, but a lot of people don't know, especially if you're, you know, like you don't speak English. I mean, you know, what are your resources that are available to you that you can lean on? You're in a foreign country. So I got up and I said, though, they wanted to limit rent increases to 3% or 60% of AMI, whichever is less. Not AMI, CPI. So CPI is like the inflation rate, right? Minus energy. So let's say CPI, like right now, it's 3.9%. So 60% of AMI or 3%, whichever is less. So let's just say it's 3%. Well, let's say you're paying $2,400 a year, and we raise it 3%. Now you're paying $2,472. Well, let's say we get inflation down to its target, which is 2%. Now we've got $2,400, okay, plus 2%. So 2% is $48, right? But it's going to be 60% of 2%. So I don't even know, what is that? So let's just say 60% of $48. So 48 times 60%. It'd be $28 you can raise your rents by. $28. I mean, you just can't get a return if the market's going up more than that. And, you know, there's laws in California that protect against this. But like last year, the average rents did not increase more than the laws allowed. In fact, they actually went down a little bit. So it's like, you know, there's not like a huge need for this. Yeah. It's just... well, I don't want to speculate too much on what it is. There's people that want it, and they got elected, and those people are getting it. They're getting it. And if I get elected, we'll turn it around. If there's the votes, you know, we'll turn it around.
Good. Yeah. Let's go back to what you were. I think we veered off. I'm sorry.
To the burr
we might need to cut that out. I probably can't say what I'm going to do if I get elected.
No, it's okay.
You know, I don't think we can cut this out. This is.
I don't know if our audience is centered around.
Yeah, they're not. They're not going to. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about before.
Burr method. Let's get back there. Let's get back there.
Yeah. ADD moment. So here's the things you got to look out for when you're doing the burr. You really have to know your numbers, because if you're going to go buy, like I'm in a few of these burr community groups, and I've been commenting to help people, and some of my comments have gone viral, and I've gotten like 50, 60 people reaching out to me for help. If you're going to go do burr on like a single family home, let's say, or a duplex, you really have to know your numbers. So if you go in and let's say it's a $400,000 home and you put down 20%, so that's $80,000, right? And then you got to go remodel it. So you spend $150,000. So now you're into a $400,000 home for $230,000, right? So that's a lot. So, and then you go, okay, now I've increased the rents, and now I'm going to do cash out refinance and get my money back. Probably not going to get your money back. You know, it depends on what the value of that home is. Now, if the value of that home fixed up is like $800,000, that's great. But the valuation is not calculated the same way. And also, there are seasoning requirements by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So you can't just go buy a house and rehab and get cash out refinance. Okay, you can get like HELOC. There's ways to access cash for sure, but there's 12. You have to wait 12 months from the time that you buy it to get a cash out refinance. And so, and some people say, well, my uncle did it. And he didn't have to wait 12 months. Well, they recently changed it. So tell your uncle he's wrong. So you just really have to know your numbers, and you have to know that in a lot of situations you're probably not going to get all your cash back, and in a lot of situations single family homes will not cash flow. So this is the other thing you have to look at. Like I'm helping somebody right now, and her situation is she's trying to refi out of a hard money loan. Appraisal came in low. She has a problem because her mortgage was written to her LLC as the borrower and not to her as the borrower, titled in the LLC. And Freddie Mac won't allow you to refinance a rate and term transaction unless you are the borrower on the loan. And when your LLC is the borrower and you're guaranteeing it, you're the guarantor, not the mortgagor, which doesn't mean that you're the borrower. Yeah. It means that you're pledging a guarantee for the borrower who is your entity. It's kind of complicated, right? So she's in this kind of messed up situation. Fannie Mae allows it, but Fannie Mae doesn't allow you to refinance if your loan to value is above 75% on an investment property. Freddie allows you to do it at 80, right? So anyway, so she's trying to get her hard money lender off her back. She's not getting money out of this thing right now. She won't for a while.
And hard money, her rates are probably really high.
Oh, and the fees have gone up. Her loan balance was $300 with all the fees and extensions. She's now at $360 for a payoff.
Yikes.
She's probably gonna have to sell it, but we have a product, a DSCR product that'll help her, which just looks at how much the property can rent for. But when I looked at that, it'll negatively cash flow. And so at the end of the day, you've got to ask yourself, do I want an investment that negatively cash flows? And the answer is no. It really isn't. I mean, if you're just trying to park your money somewhere, that's a different question. I mean, you're really rich if you're just trying to park your money somewhere. Okay, yeah. Most of us are looking for parking spots for our money. We want a return. Yep. You want cash flow. You want money that pays the bills. So you need to look at it like this. Your investment needs to follow the 1% rule, which means that if you buy a house for $500,000, it needs to generate $5,000 a month. Period.
That's
End of
good
story.
Information. Yeah.
Don't do anything else. If you do anything else, you're going to be losing unless you're in commercial real estate 5+ units, right? But even in 5+ units, that would mean that you have about a 9% cap rate. I wouldn't invest in something commercial with less than a 9% cap rate unless I had to park some money, and I don't, right? I want a return on my money. So follow the 1% rule, and you'll be in pretty good shape. And really know your numbers, and know that you probably won't be made whole on on an investment doing the BRRRR method on 1 to 4 unit residential unless you get it for a ridiculously low price, and also after you've waited for a little bit of time. So use the calculators, use bigger pockets, reach out to us. We can help you with this.
Yeah. For sure.
Specifically.
Wow, that's great information. I've heard the 1% rule from a lot of different resources, and I mean YouTube videos and stuff that I've watched. It's always a 1% rule, so that's super important. That's great information.
You know what's better than the 1% rule?
What?
The 1.5% rule.
That is
seriously, you can do it. A lot of people think it's hard to get to the 1%. It is, but like the higher you make it, the easier your life's going to be, and the better your investment's going to be.
Right, and that's the thing. If you go out to look for a property that has tenants in it already, and it's not generating enough rent, then you're kind of screwed. It's not a good investment.
Yeah.
And if you want to know how much it can rent for, go to rentometer.com and pay $40 for the professional account.
Yeah,
Rentometer.
Okay. Rent-O-meter.
Rent-O-meter. Okay.
No, just Rentometer.
Rent-O-meter.
Rent. R-E-N-T-O.
Well, Property Radar, we subscribe to that, and it has a rent.
It does.
Rent-O-meter
There's different
type
resources, but if you're just a standard person trying to see what something might go for, Rent-O-meter. I use it ever since you told me about it.
Yeah, it's great. And keep in mind, too, like when you're going to get a loan, a lot of times if they have to do a rent survey where the appraiser is tasked with finding out what the rents are on a property, it often won't be accurate because they're going to rely on data that's going to come from the multiple listing service, the MLS, which is what real estate agents have access to.
Right.
And most of the rents now are not recorded on the MLS.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you won't know. So this might mess up your deal. Like if you go, okay, great, well now I've improved it and market rents are $3,000 and the appraiser comes back, well, market rents are like $2,600 according to the MLS.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the only one finishing my wine. What's going on here?
Well, it's because Rob's talking the whole time.
11:49. Yeah.
I'm just over here sipping and nodding.
Yeah, sipping and nodding. That's what we're doing.
It's a lot of information. That's a lot of information, and it's really helpful, I think.
Really good information.
Obviously, we can expand more if anybody is interested in this topic. We could just go on and on forever, I think. But for this episode, how are we doing?
How are we doing on time?
I think we're pretty good. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. Do you have anything else that you want to add? That's a lot of information I'm still digesting.
Yeah, I'm digesting it too. I mean, this is great. Did you want to make some more points on that. You said the 40 unit commercial type of thing. Yeah. Go ahead and make some points on that.
So if you're going to buy commercial real estate, and let's say that they do their DSCR calculation, and because of the cap rates, the person selling the property or the entity selling the property says, well, we want $20 million for the property. And the lender comes in, they go, well, based on the amount of money that it generates, we'll finance $11 million of the property. Okay, that means you have to come up with $9 million plus closing costs, right?
Right.
So that's why it's a little bit difficult to enter the commercial market out here. It's less difficult in states in the Midwest. And people go, what about getting the seller to carry the mortgage? Well, you're not going to find a seller to carry a mortgage in the Bay Area. You're just not. It's going to be really unusual just because there's such high demand for multifamily properties. Now, if you go to somewhere like Michigan or Illinois or Kansas or Tennessee, sure, you might find like a $400,000 9-unit apartment building where the seller's willing to carry some money back on it, especially if you give them your solid plan that you've got some cash to rehab the property and you're going to refinance it in 24 months. Yeah, that might work. But it's really unusual to find somebody that's going to sell or carry a really big note because people, they don't want to be in the business of, you got to think about it from this perspective. Lenders, and if you're selling and carrying a note, that means that you're now a lender. You're carrying the loan, so they're making payments to you. Lenders don't want to be in the business of real estate, right? So let's say that you stop making payments for whatever reason. Well, now me, the lender, is in the business of real estate because I've got to come foreclose on that property, take it from you, and sell it and recoup my damages. And I don't want to get into that situation. So if you're going to look at, like you say, there's a $20 million property, and you're going to email the guy and go, hey, will you do a sell or carry? I've got $40,000. You're not going to do that, of course. But like they're most of the time they're not going to carry. Now, if you had a significant down payment and you explained to the seller, a solid reason, you could maybe find somebody that could carry for a shorter period of time. But you're going to find more of that in other markets. And there's great resources for this online and places that teach you how to approach these sellers and get these seller carry situations. So the other thing I want to talk about was when you're planning to do a cash out refinance on an investment property, there's a couple of things you need to know. So we're talking, single family homes. Let's just make it real basic. 70%. 70. I just pulled it up. Hold on. It's 75% is the max cash out for 1 unit. 2 to 4 units is 70%, right, on an investment property. So let's say you've waited your 12 months. Let's say you bought that house for $400,000. Okay, you put $125,000 into it, so you're into it for $525,000 plus your investment, the down payment. So you're into it for a couple of things: the dollar value and also the cash out of pocket, right? And you want to get your cash out of pocket, which we established was $230,000.
Okay.
So let's say the new value is now, you buy a property around here for $400,000 and fix it up. What's the after repair value going to be?
You can't buy a property for $400,000.
Okay.
We're talking about single family.
Let's make a realistic scenario here. In Pinole, you've got a 3-2 and it's run down, and it needs $150,000 in work. What is that going to house?
You're at 6 1/4, right?
Yeah, I would say at minimum 6. If it's really run down and you really have to put
not really run down, just run down. It needs $150,000 in work, right?
So minimum 6, so you're in it for $750.
3 and 2, I would say you're not really going under 5. 6 for that.
Okay, so let's say it's 6. Sounds like 600,000 is the consensus. And then plus
you got, 150.
You got closing costs. So we're going to add $15,000 in closing costs.
Okay.
All right. Now you're going to put $150,000 into it. So now you're into it for $765,000. Now you've got a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in Pinole. How much is that selling for?
Yeah, it's in the 8s.
8 what?
Probably 8, 9.
Maybe, depending on size. So I'm thinking of my house just for reference, or even yours, and maybe mid-8s.
Say 850.
Say 850.
Okay. So now it's worth $850. So you brought a property for $600. You put $150 into it. Now it's worth $850 times 0.7. You can cash out to $595. So let's see what our original loan was. 600 times 0.8 would be $480. So you will get $115,000 out of that, and you're into it for $230. So that means that you're into $230 minus $115. So that means you're out $115 for now.
So you take that $115 and you burr that. Right,
but how many times you can't really burr it very well if you didn't replace your cash. You didn't replace your cash. You lost your cash.
You lost your cash
momentarily. So this is why people need to be really careful. Overestimating the exit price. So I have a really good friend who's an investor. His name is James. James, if you're watching this, which you probably will, shout out to James. OG.
James,
you guys
what's
know
up?
James.
I know James.
James is great. And James has taught me a lot. So James always told me in a down market or when there's turbulence in the market, you need to bake in an extra 10% on your margins, right? And you need to have at least 20% margins going into a deal anyways.
Okay.
And so I've always followed this, right? And if you go, I can't find a deal, you will find a deal. You can always find it. There's deals in every single market, but especially in turbulent markets or down markets, you need to make sure that you're baking in extra margin, right? Mm-hmm. And so people get caught up because they go, I'm going to buy it for this and sell it for this, but you got to know, like, what can I cash out to, and when can I cash out? Mm-hmm. Like if it's a single family home or 1 to 4 units, you can't cash out for 12 months. You could get a HELOC, and you're talking like 14% right now, 15% on a investment property HELOC, right? And then when you do cash out, just a friendly reminder, you're probably going to pay 3 or 4 points. I mean, an investment property maximum cash out refinance is not a favorable scenario. You're not going to go get like a no points at 6.5%. You know, so if you're going to add that to your loan, you got to go, okay, well, I got to make sure that I have room in my loan to value, right, with closing costs put in there. Mm-hmm. So James is really good. If I'm curious about a deal, I always run it by James. And I think the 2 deals I've done, one of them, James was like, yeah, well, if you don't do that, tell me, because I'm going to do it. Which I was like, cool, I'm definitely going to do it then.
Definitely doing it now.
Yeah. And then James lent me money to rehab the property. So this is another thing you could do. You can find private investors to improve your property. Now, I wasn't using the BRRRR method there. I'm more of a fan of the rent. I want to rent out my properties, right? But I also want them to generate more than 1% per month gross, right? And so the way that I've done that is through short-term rentals and adding ADUs and things like that. So James lent me money to add an ADU on a property, and then
sounds like we need to all call James.
We need to call James.
James is a good friend. James is a good friend. But there are real estate investors in your local market, and you can do what I did and get to know them and ask them for advice. There's a lot of times there's not young people going to real estate investors. I went to James and I said, James, teach me everything you know.
Yeah.
I literally said that to him. I love James. He's a great friend of mine. But I recognized success. Mm-hmm. I was like, this guy's very successful at what he does. I want to learn everything. He doesn't have kids. Who's learning from him? I was like, teach me everything. I want to know all of it, right?
Stop me.
And he's an open book. He'll tell me all these things. He's like, Rob, people don't ask me. They don't ask me how I do this. I'm like, I don't know how much James has made in his career of flipping houses, but it's millions and millions and millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And nobody's sitting there in the classroom going, hey, question, how can I do that?
We need to get him on a podcast.
We definitely need to get James on a podcast. Okay. James is amazing. But, it's like he learned how to do these things the hard way. He didn't have somebody. Like I'm very lucky. I take him out to lunch and, he tells me trade secrets, right? This is amazing. But you need somebody like that. And oftentimes, if you're finding somebody like that that's primed into their career and they trust that you've learned the important details of, what to do and what to avoid, mm-hmm. you can find people like that will also invest in you or partner with you on a project. That's how James got started, getting investors on projects. Now, just a friendly reminder, when you get an investor on a project, you're not going to make very much money, right? Mm-hmm. You can typically go in and say, hey, I'm going to do this flip and I want 10%. But you have to subordinate your 10%, which means that if Jamie's my investor and she invests in my project and I say I want 10% of the profit, but the project doesn't make money or it breaks even or it loses money, I'm subordinating my 10% to her making her desired target, not just breaking even, making her desired target. So if Jamie wants a 20% return, I say, hey, Jamie, I found this property. I can get 40% if we flip it, okay? Mm-hmm. I want 10%. Great. Let's say that it makes, but I'll say I'll subordinate to you making 10%. Mm-hmm. Now let's say it makes 15%. Okay, I'm making 5, Jamie's making 10. Mm-hmm. That's how that works. And then you build up your cash until you can do it on your own. And this is true for a lot of scenarios. So if you're going to go and you say, well, I got investors, that's great. But just keep in mind that in order to get investors or have investors or be serious about this, they have to trust you. They have to know you really well mm-hmm. and know that you can be successful at it. And you won't make a very big return, but it's a great way to get started. Yeah. That's how that works.
Right. So just like anything else, you learn and you grow and you make more money later on. Yeah.
But I say this because I've heard people say, I'll just get an investor, somebody else will buy it and I'll manage it and I'll make all this money and they'll make their 10%. It's like, no, that's, you're not a real estate fund. You're an individual.
Right.
You'll make 10% if they make their target. And if you go about it that way, you're serving others. You're saying, I'm putting you first. You're going to make money. You'll build trust, especially if you do it right. You follow your numbers and
Well, so many people are focused on this get rich quick. How can I spend the least amount of money, make the most amount of money, and, right off into the sunset? And that's not how it works. And I think anybody super successful knows that it's slow growth. It's all about slow growth and sustaining that and
learning,
compounding
and
constantly
learning.
Yeah,
and not be the smartest guy in the room. I'm a huge advocate of that. I don't ever want to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm not that smart, so I always want to have somebody smarter than me.
He's very self-deprecating.
Well, it's true though. You always want to hang out with people that you can learn things from. That's why I hang out with you, Rob.
Yeah.
That's right. We love Rob.
Yeah.
That's not all.
I appreciate
Rob's
that.
smart.
I mean, the first thing I ever taught Jason was how to fix a toilet. So
that's right.
We have a long history of this.
Rob is smart, and he makes great martinis. Anybody?
Certain things I'm good at. I'm a good beekeeper. Yeah.
And he's a great beekeeper, but he makes great martinis.
No, we learn from each other. This is fun. It's a good friendship.
Awesome.
All right.
So, any other points you want to make before we wrap up here?
I would just say that if you're in any market, so you can always reach out to us, even if you're in Wisconsin, and we can help you. I mean, I lend in all these states, so I could always do a loan for you. But lean on professionals in your area. You know what I mean? If you're going to buy a multifamily, go to the brokerages and say, who sells multifamilies? And don't cold call them because you'll get routed to the newbie who's going to get go down there and say, I want to know who's sold multi-units. If you want to find out and then go chat with them and use them. A lot of people try and cut corners and cut fees by cutting out the real estate agent, and you're not going to win that way. I mean, eventually you might be seasoned enough where you can go get your license and represent yourself, but lean on pros in your area. Those are pro investors. Those are pro real estate agents. Those are pro loan officers. And that's how you get success, right? You're not going to take, marriage advice from somebody who's divorced, right? You're not going to take business advice from somebody who's bankrupt.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's
true.
That's it.
Yeah, very good.
Well, that's awesome. Rob, where can we find you on social media?
Robert Ring Team, pretty much universally. RING is my last name. Team, like a baseball team. Robert Ring Team.
Okay. Robert
And you have a couple of groups on Facebook.
Yeah, I've got a group called All About ADUs. I'm really into accessory dwelling units, so you can find me on there. I'm in the BRRRR Invest group, which is kind of fun. I like to deal storm on there, help people solve problems. But on Facebook, Robert Ring. You can find me, message me. I check my message requests. I go all 3 layers deep to see if somebody's trying to get a hold of me.
Okay,
awesome.
that's good.
On the Facebook Messenger inbox, you know what I'm talking about?
I need to do that more.
Well, we'll put all the information in the description here. So.
Yeah, we'll link that. You can find us on Instagram at Maddox Real Estate, at realtor.jamie, Jamie, not Jaime. And at the Maddox Podcast.
It's MaddoxPodcast.com.
God bless America.
Not just MaddoxPodcast.com.
MaddoxPodcast.com. One day I'll get it right.
Join and subscribe. We have over
65,000 subscribers.
Or
62?
I think we're 62 or 65, something like that.
Something like that. I checked last night. It's insane. We love the growth.
It's amazing.
We appreciate it. And it's...
Yeah.
I would like to do a little promo here.
Yeah.
Can I? There's a new podcast coming called Maddox After
Hours.
After Hours.
Maddox
we are
After
talking
Hours.
about it. It's going to be
You'll
great.
hear more sultry wine descriptions.
There's going to be lots of wine,
things.
and I think the conversations are going to happen after a couple bottles of wine. So, right. So
put your kids to bed, open the wine,
That's right.
turn on the Maddox
Private
After
channel
Hours
by link
podcast.
only.
Right. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.